Um, Great. Thank you so much, Diana. Can everybody see my screen, the title slide? Are we all good? I'm going to take that as a yes.
Yes, yes.
Thank you. Diana, you might want to chat with Lisa too. Maybe she's still having audio problems, so maybe she can leave and come back again. That might help. All right, so welcome everybody. Good morning. As Diana said, this is the last day of CAPE. I hope that you have found the conference to be informative and that you were able to get some things out of all the different sessions. There were so many and so many great ones. A lot of information in the last 4 days. So my name is Elisa Takeuchi. I am an ESL and CTE teacher at Garden Grove Adult Education in sunny Southern California. And I am also an OTAN subject matter expert. This is going on my 5th year with OTAN. And I'm very, very excited to do this presentation with you. It's a new presentation for me. And I've been thinking about it for a long time. And I thought, as time is going on and years of going, accumulated with me, that I really wanted just to inform new teachers what it's like with adult education, because many teachers that are new to adult ed are actually K through 12 teachers and things, and it is a kind of a different boat. I was a K through 12 teacher at first, at the beginning of my career, and then I've switched over. But yeah, I think that there's just so many different elements to adult education, and I really just wanted to share my experience with you. And again, you can take what you want and leave what you want, and hopefully some of the information, at least one thing, will be helpful for you that you can start using right away. If you do have any questions about this presentation or just in general, please contact OTAN at support@otan.us. Let's get started. If you could do me a favor in the chat, if you can type in your name and what agency you work for, and then how long have you been teaching in adult ed, whether it's been a few weeks or a few months or maybe a year or two, or maybe if you've had a few years in you. Go ahead and type that in the chat for me. That would be great. All right, and like I said, this session is sponsored by OTAN, and if you are new to adult education, OTAN is your resource. There are 3 state leadership projects in California that are solely supporting adult education, and OTAN, we help you to integrate more technology into the classroom, and CASAS is more for the assessment part of it, and CalPro is for your professional development. So anytime that you need any help or support or resources on technology, any aspect of technology, please reach out to OTAN and we will help you out. So here's our agenda. This is what I'm thinking that we're going to cover today. We are going to go over how to make connections with your students. Again, it's a little bit of a different beast than it is with K through 12, in that, obviously they are adults. Anybody 18 and older can be an adult ed student. And so sometimes those connections really can be powerful and meaningful to the students. We'll talk about curriculum. Every agency has different curriculum and things, but there are some overlapping themes and things that we could talk about to help you out. Time management, that's kind of a big one, especially if you're a new teacher in general. Time management seems to be something that needs to be acquired and worked out and just trial and error. We'll talk about assessments, both formative and summative. And then last but not least, we'll talk about acronyms. Oh my gosh, adult education has so many acronyms and keywords that we use a lot. It's a lot of lingo. So as you hear other people talking, we forget that new teachers may not, know or understand what that means as we just keep talking. And then you're listening to all these different vocabulary words and acronyms, and you have no idea. It's like another language. So we'll go over some of those as well. I'm going to check the chat real fast just to see what you guys had written. We've got Lodi. Lexi's from Lodi. Good. Rita's been here for a couple years. Yep, coming from the K through 12. Me too, Lexi. Taught 2 years in adult ed in the past. Perfect. Great. Kanima is here from Saddleback in Southern California. Rita's from Antelope. Nice, very nice. Great. Thanks for putting that in the chat for me. I love getting a feel for the room just to, see where people are at. Um, Also, like I said, I teach primarily ESL. That's basically what I've been doing for the last 20 years is teaching to ESL. And then I just started teaching a CTE class this semester. If you are in ABE or HSD, a lot of the things, even though if I refer to ESL, it will also connect with you as, you know, and but if you do have specific questions about your department, you know, some suggestions or things, just put them in the chat and we'll get to them. So let's start about making connections with your students. So, I know it's almost November now, so you probably have been teaching, you know, at least within the semester for a little while. But just know that students don't know that you're new, and whether you want to convey that to them or not, that's totally up to you. But if you just go in there with confidence and like this is your thing and you're the teacher and you're doing it, they wouldn't even have a clue. But if you really do want to just be kind of transparent with them and to say, hey, you know, you're my first class. I'm so excited to do this with you, you know, not show so much your nervousness or anything, but just, you know, being there with confidence and like how excited you are to be with them because they are going to love you no matter what. I was telling Diana just a little bit before we started, adult education is literally the best kept secret because the students are so motivated. They are there because they want to be there. And every day they're so appreciative of everything that you do. And literally like the students will treat you like Ellen. It's like they're just so happy. And so that really, even if you're a little bit tired or you know it's been a long day or whatnot, as soon as you walk into the classroom and you get that energy from the students, it changes completely. My other suggestion that I really take seriously is that you learn their names as soon as possible. I mean, within a week of your class, or within, no more than a month, I would say, you know, depending on how large your group is and, you know, things like that. But really try hard to learn their names because that connection will be instant. As soon as you recognize them, that they're not just some student that's coming into your class every day, that you actually recognize them and you actually say good morning to them with their name or goodbye or call on them, you know, for to call, you know, to make an answer or something. And you use their names, they pay more attention. They know that you know that they're there and that they're seen. And so I one of the tips that I do to learn my students' names quicker is that I give them homework. And, you know, some of you are kind of like rolling your eyes, like, oh my gosh, that's just, you know, another thing that I have to do or correct. And sometimes what I do is I just make it a very easy homework assignment. Maybe 'cause I teach beginning ESL. So at the very beginning of the school year, we're always practicing the alphabet. So for homework, I just have them, you know, write the alphabet twice, you know, like for your homework, write the alphabet 2 times. So they're writing it and then I get, you know, I can check it very quickly. And then what happens is that I am forced to hand back their homework. And so I have to recognize the paper, the name on the paper with the student name. And luckily students, you know, adults, we are very prone to habit. And so usually we sit in the same seat. So once you start making that connection of the name and the person in that seat, it tends to be a little bit easier to remember that name. Now, if they switch seats or not, that could be a little troublesome. Or if you see them outside, you might not remember them right away. But after a while, you will get to recognize your students and know their names. And so again, that connection that you make with them from the get-go is super important. The other thing that I would tell you is that you don't want to waste their time, and at the same time, you don't want them to waste your time. And what I mean by that is, um, just because they're adults, it doesn't mean that we need to give them a lot of like latitude and like and like making things very relaxing and like, oh, you know, they've worked, especially if you teach at night. They're like, oh, they've worked all day and they're so tired, and you know, we're just going to go do something fun or you know, something relaxing. The students really don't want that. And I know that it's kind of counterintuitive because you think, oh, you know, they are tired. What they really want is they want to be instructed. They want to know that their time is not being wasted and that they're learning something in every class. And so um, by okay, I'll give you an example of something that happened years and years ago, but we had a teacher that was kind of new and they, you know, they had that empathy of them like, oh, they worked all day and stuff, you know, I'm just gonna, you know, do fun things and we're gonna play games and we're gonna have a party. And all of a sudden all the students started dropping, like they just wouldn't come back. And she was blown away. She didn't understand why that was happening. And I kind of took her to the side, and we were talking about, because I didn't know the situation. And so she was telling me, yeah, we come in, we play bingo, and we do this, and da da da. And I kind of let her know that maybe that the students, they don't really, that's fun once in a while, but if you do that all the time, it's not really it's not a good um, time management thing. It's not good for their time. They want to learn things. They want to know that when they leave that classroom, that they've actually learned something, whether it's new vocabulary or grammar or speaking and listening. And so you have to be a little bit more academic with them, because that's what they're there for. And it's not like K through 12 where they're mandated to be there. The students choose with their feet. That's what, we say. We say that the students choose with their feet. If they are interested in your class, they're going to walk into your classroom. If they're not really interested, they're going to stay home. They're not going to walk into your classroom. So again, really just be kind of conscientious about your time in the classroom and what it means to them. Um, my other thing is that I would really, really encourage you to start at the time that you're supposed to start. My class starts at 6 o'clock. I start at 6 o'clock. I mean, 98% of the time, unless there's some, issue that I have to take care of, or I'm talking with another teacher or a student, I always start at 6 o'clock, whether I have one student or all my students, because you want to reward the students who are there on time. Because a lot of teachers, what they do is they're like, oh, let's just give it like 5 more minutes, or let's, there's not a lot of students here, so let's just wait until they trickle in. Well, what you're doing is you're telling that the student, you're basically saying to the students that are there on time that their time it's not valued. And so the students who are late know that they're late. And so as they're coming in, whatever they've missed, they're just going to have to, catch up. I'm not really going to go back and do my lesson again. But I am just going to continue, and then they could ask another student later on, things like that. So I really value the students' time who do come on time. And when I taught advanced ESL, what I did then for them was I did dictation. So the two things that adult students really, especially ESL, and this applies to all departments, but for ESL especially, the two things that they really want the most whenever you give them a needs assessment is listening and speaking. And so, using that time for the students who are there on time, I did dictation with them. So I would, at 6 o'clock, I'd be like, okay, piece of paper number one. And I would give them a dictation sentence, and they would listen and write, and we do like 5 of them. So then as students are coming in, they get to their seat and they're listening. Now they're starting to catch up with, what we're doing. So again, to me, it's just valuable to really recognize that you're not going to wait for it, because okay, here's the other thing too. If you keep saying, oh, let's just wait a few more minutes, or, for students, the students who are there at 6 o'clock will stop not coming at 6 o'clock, because they know that you're not going to start. So they'll start coming in late as well. And then it kind of goes into a little trickle effect. And so again, that's kind of my little, um, my little lecture to you. My other thing to say would be to embrace the teachable moments, in that, usually you have an agenda and you have like your curriculum, maybe it's a textbook or, some sort of packet or EL Civics or whatnot. But then things will come up almost daily, and a student will ask you a question, or, maybe is confused about something. Take the time to stop whatever you're doing and reach out and really focus on that particular teachable moment, because they don't, even though they come around quite often, that particular teachable moment usually doesn't come around. And so you want to take the opportunity to really acknowledge that the student, first of all, asked a question, which is really difficult for adults. A lot of them, like, even if they have a question, a lot of personalities, it's that, they're very quiet and shy, and they just want to listen to the teacher and, just get the information. They won't ask a question. So if they actually do ask you a question, take that time to really acknowledge it and then address it. And then the other thing is that sometimes you'll teach in a lesson, and like another vocabulary word would come up that you didn't even expect it to. So then you go, and maybe it's, it's a, I don't know. I'm just going to give an example. For example, we were talking about something and the word elephant came up. And I asked my students if they knew what elephant was, and maybe like one or two. So then I just went to Google and I typed in elephant. I showed them a picture, and everybody went, oh, so it wasn't expected. Like I didn't even expect to do that, but I mean, it just took a moment for me to like just pull it up and Google it and show them, and everybody was on the same page now. They all understood what elephant was, and we can move on. So don't be afraid to just go ahead and embrace those teachable moments. The other thing with adult ed that's very different with K through 12 is that we have open enrollment. So open enrollment means that students can, new students, most of the time, most agencies are open enrollment. There are some that have managed enrollment, but for most adult ed schools, adult ed students can come and enter into a classroom at any time during the school year or during the semester. And they can also leave at any time during the semester or during the school year for whatever reasons, whether they're not interested in the class anymore, maybe they got a new job and their schedule has changed, maybe they don't have babysitting anymore than they used to, their car broke down, they moved to another, back home to their home country. There's so many variables about why students come and go at different times, and that can be very difficult for adult ed teachers because that really affects your classroom management. And so you really want to just embrace that. I mean, not get too stressed about it because it just inevitably will happen. So when you do get a new student in, and you're like, we're in week 10 right now, and I'm still getting new students in, and so, you just have to really go through and either establish some sort of new student routine, or you can actually recruit one of your students that is there, like a regular student that comes, often, and have them be like the new student, liaison for you. And then they can help the new students out, making sure that they, all the little routine things that you just kind of take it for granted as you get through your semester, have them help the new student. And then the last thing that I'm going to tell you about connections is letting them get to know you on a personal basis. And I'm going to show you something on the next slide about that. So last week I was in the hospital last week, and I didn't go to school all week. And so um, I really wanted to convey to the students like why I was absent and things like that. And at the same time, because I teach beginning ESL, I made it an authentic reading. So that's part of adult ed too. So part of our curriculum and our frameworks is to incorporate authentic reading in all levels. And so a lot of times with beginning ESL, it's very difficult to find reading passages that are level appropriate for them. So usually I'm having to recreate it anyways. I'll take a passage and then I'll rewrite it in a more simple language, or I just create one for myself. And so let me show you what I did. So, so I made this little, I'm a Google Slides person. So I made this Google Slides for my students, and it was about my trip to the hospital. And this is just a few slides. I just pulled them out real fast. But again, you can see that I'm using very simple language because it's appropriate for my students. And then I'm also using, prepositions because we just happen to be doing prepositions in my class. And so I was talking to them about that. So I explained to them why I was absent last week, and I gave them, and so again, I took some selfies while I was in the hospital and things like that. And they really kind of got to know me because, what it's like when you were a kid or when you were in school, and it's like your teacher is so far, it's like so removed from you. So then when you actually get them to know you as a real person, you really establish this connection with them. They really see you in a different light, that you are the teacher, but yet you are a person as well. So I highly encourage you. I mean, I do this for all, like Thanksgiving break, what did I do over Thanksgiving? And I take pictures, over Thanksgiving, and I'll make a little story from when we come back, or Christmas break, or whatever it is, anything that's happening. Maybe you went on a trip somewhere. If you just take some photos and things and make a little story out of it, they really appreciate it, and they're doing their reading, they're learning about you, and it's a really, really nice feeling that they have about their teacher. So time management, one of the most difficult things for any teacher, any new teacher, is time management, really kind of gauging how long something should take, or am I going too slow, or am I going too fast for them? Really kind of understanding. And it takes some time and some trial and error to really kind of establish this. You really do need to gauge from your students how fast or how slow you should be going. And I would caution you not to a couple of things. Don't worry that you're going too slow, especially if you're in ESL. But if you're in HSE or ABE and you're doing a lesson as well, don't worry. I mean, repeating things over and over again is beneficial. It's not boring. And like we think, oh my God, they're so bored. I've already said this, or we've already done this. It's not. It's another opportunity for them to demonstrate that they understand their knowledge. And so sometimes the first time around, they're just trying to absorb information. And especially if it's a language thing too, they're really trying to like translate and they're trying to do this. And a lot of times they miss some things. So when you go back and repeat it, they've already heard some of the information. So now they can kind of absorb it in a new way. And then they're going to learn more new things that they didn't learn the first time. So please don't ever think that, repeating things over and over again is a bad thing. So, I don't know for any of you if you teach ESL, but I do the alphabet every single day, the alphabet and the numbers. We do it every single day. And I'm in week 10. So that's every single day for 10 weeks. And so the reason why I do that is because now they know the alphabet, most of them. And plus again, I get new students, so I want them to be able to, learn the alphabet as well. And then now that they know the alphabet, like in memorization, I'm checking for the pronunciation. So now it's more of a step up. So now okay, I recognize that you know the alphabet, but I'm listening to your sound, and let's practice H, or let's practice R, the different sounds. And so that's really mean for them as well. And then writing, we do the writing every day, and I'm checking for their penmanship, because especially as adults, a lot of them who are literate in their own language, they already have their own style of writing, but sometimes the penmanship is really messy. And so we go back and I have them write the alphabet so that it's clean, because it doesn't make sense for them to write something but the teacher can't read it. So because I'm in beginning ESL, I know that the teachers, like as they promote to other levels, the other teachers really appreciate that as well, because the writing is so much cleaner. Another thing that some teachers do is, especially when they're new, is that they'll ask a question, and you'll always have one or two or maybe three students that are kind of higher level, and they'll answer very quickly. And you think that, oh, okay, we can move on. But what happens is that those three, a handful of students always answer very quickly, and everybody else does not. So whether or not they're just shy, or they didn't know the answer, or because somebody else already answered, they don't want to answer, you'll never know. And so what happens is that you sometimes miss those moments, and you don't understand why the students didn't understand this particular lesson. And it might be because you had a few students who answered very quickly, and then you're afraid to repeat again, and so you move on. So what you might want to do is a couple of things. If you have some students that answer very quickly, sometimes after a while, I kind of talk to them on the side, and I explain to them, like, hey, please don't answer so fast, because the other students, don't talk, and we want everybody to talk. And if you kind of explain it to them like that, they really understand, and they go, oh, okay. And sometimes, oh, okay. So, but then you'll have other students that just can't help it. They just do it, and you just let that go. Or you can also just kind of call on students, or a group of like this half of the class, so like this side of the group, this side of the class, you're A, and this side you're B. So you ask a question or whatever it is, and you say, okay, group B, what's the answer? And then at least they have an opportunity to answer as a smaller group. But yeah, so please don't take it that a few students knowing the answer means everybody knows the answer, because that's not necessarily true. Another thing that catches teachers, and I am guilty of this all the time, is that I'll do something, blah blah blah, and I say, okay, everybody understand, and inevitably everybody goes like this, and you know that they don't. So you might want to just kind of maybe realize not to ask that question, like ask the question in a different way by having them demonstrate to you that they understand, or call on individual students and have them, so that you can really gauge how well the students are understanding that particular lesson. Definitely quality over quantity. Again, it's going back to those teachable moments. It's not like I have to finish 10 workbook pages, by the end of the class, because that's just filling in time. You're just doing workbook page. Really taking the time to explain the workbook pages, going over vocabulary, anything new that comes up, the grammar, point, or whatever it is. Don't be afraid to go outside of your textbook as well, when it comes to teachable moments. Sometimes it just happens. We had a vocabulary word, and it was a pen, a book, a ruler, an eraser. And there was no mention of that in the book itself, but I asked my students, like, why are these ones A and this one's N? And a couple of them knew the answer, but most of them did not. So we went and we just did a whole nother lesson just on that. And so I explained to them why it was, and we did a few practices and things. And then we went right back into our workbook again. So, I mean, just taking the time just to not brush it off just because it's not in the teacher, the lesson plan. You could go ahead and remove yourself from that and just, take the time to explain things like that to them. The other thing is embrace the silence. And I really hope you take this to heart. A lot of times, especially in ESL, but also in other departments, you ask a question and there's crickets. And you start to panic a little bit. You're like, you start looking around your classroom and you're thinking, did they not understand? Or maybe I talked too fast, or you don't know. What they're doing is that they're listening to what you're saying, they're processing it, and it takes a few seconds, and then they'll start answering. But if you rush too fast, if you give them a question and then like there's silence and then you rush on, they don't have that time to process anything. So just take the time, like look over your attendance or do something. Just give them a minute or two, not even a minute, 30 seconds or so to kind of process, and you'll start hearing some answers. And again, it might be from the students that answer very quickly, but then if you ask it again, make sure you ask the question one more time, because now they've processed that question and they're hearing again, they're checking to see if they understand, and more students will be able to answer. So again, please, please, please embrace the silence. And like I said before, don't be afraid to repeat. All right, so let's talk about formative assessments. If you could put in the chat for me what you think a formative, like what are some examples of a formative assessment is that you think that you could do in the classroom? If you could type in the chat what you think a formative assessment could be. What kind of formative assessments? And if you don't know, that's okay. I shall embrace the silence for a moment. If you have students that are online, this is a perfect moment to tell you this too. If you have students that are online, you really need to give them some extra time too, because they may not be fast typers. If they're typing in the chat, they may not, you ask the question, they thought about it, they're thinking about their answer, and they may not type very quickly. So instead of moving on, you just have to wait for people to type. So again, so Eric typed in, and it's a pretty long sentence. So if I would have just kind of moved on, he might not have had that opportunity to share what it was. Check for understanding of the material that was presented that day. Perfect. Kahoot, exit tickets, etc. Absolutely. Those are perfect examples of formative assessments. Think, pair, share. Exactly, Kristen. And then at the same time, as you're getting your feel for it, especially, I mean, even for presenting too, there is a time to kind of move on. But, again, you always give the students a chance to, participate. So, even in speaking wise, you can ask the students, hey, if you think of something, just tell me. Give them an opportunity. Maybe it took them a little while to think about something, but you give them the opportunity to share it later on. Not a problem. With formative assessments, you really want to do formative assessments multiple times every class. Because every time you do something new, you want to check to see if they're understanding before you move on. So sometimes we don't move on. We end up not moving on because the thing that we thought might be something that they'll engage in, easily, maybe wasn't. And so I'm going to have to scaffold now, and I'm going to have to do a little bit more, some more activities to support that particular lesson. And so, you want to do quality over quantity. I don't want to move on until I know that most of the students, not 100%, 75% of the students understand. And then the other 25, maybe it'll come back around and they'll get it the next round. We really want to check your list. They're listening, they're speaking, they're reading, they're writing. And not every formative assessment will be that. Maybe once it's the listening, or once it's a reading, or once it's a speaking, things like that. And your formative assessments should always, always practice for the summative. You never want to give a summative assessment. That's the final, like the chapter test, or, the end of the lesson test. You don't want to give them a test that they're not prepared for. and that's content and style. So if it's a multiple choice test, but you didn't do any multiple choice activities throughout the whole lesson, it might be very confusing for them to know how to do a multiple choice test. They might not know how to bubble in or do it online, especially if it's an online test too. You never want to give students an online test that they're not familiar with. So if it's a Google form or whatever, you need to have some formative Google forms so that they have that opportunity to practice before they, so you never want to have the technology interfere with the content. Um, if it was for, fill in the blanks, things like that. If it's a fill in the blank test or a speaking test or whatever it is, you really want to make sure that you have those activities within your lessons to practice so that when the test comes, they are very familiar with that. They're not thinking about how to take the test. They're just thinking about the content. Oops. Okay, so I just wanted to show you some pictures that I take of my class. And so this is another way to get instant feedback on formative. So what it is that if you can see on the picture on the left, you'll see that the students wrote Vietnam or China. So basically the question is, where are you from? And so what they do is they write their answers and then they show me their whiteboards, and I can see instantly who understood, who listened, who understood the question, and did they answer it correctly. And then I'm also checking for their writing. Did they capitalize it? Did they spell it correctly? Things. So there's a lot of stuff going on in a very simple activity. And so I do this. And so I did this for advanced. I did this for ABE. I could do this for HSD. You can use these for any level, for anything. And you really just want to check to see, do students understand? And you will have some students who will like kind of look at other people's whiteboards and then copy the answers. And for this, that's okay, because then you're understanding that they don't get it yet. And you just keep practicing. We do it for the alphabet. I do it for their student ID numbers, personal information. You could, for higher levels, you could do it for the past tense of verbs. You could do it for the present participles. I mean, whatever it is that you're trying to check for their understanding, and then they demonstrate it. If you don't have these little whiteboards, they are kind of expensive, but I would ask your school to invest in them. I think that they're a really good thing to have in classrooms. I have student directed assessments where this particular activity was a dictation. The students listened to me say sentences and they wrote them down. They checked them with each other. They checked with like a partner, like a shoulder partner. And we definitely check for capitals and periods. Again, I'm beginning ESL, but again, intermediate, high, advanced students, they forget capitals and periods all the time as well. And then, grammar, prepositions, things like that. So the students come up to the board. I have volunteers first. I ask if there's any volunteers. And then if there's not, then, or if I do it a couple of times, I will start choosing some students that I feel like are maybe a little bit shy or they don't really volunteer too many times. And I ask them to go ahead and write it. And then I'm right there with them. If they have like some anxiety or if they have, if they're feeling like they don't know it, I'm right there with them and I'll help them out, or the other students actually will help them out as well. And in order for the students to actually help them out in English and not in their own language, you have to give them the sentence structures of what to say, or the vocabulary, the vernacular of what to say. So like we teach the words capital. So they say, number two, capital C. So then the student who is writing the sentence can hear that, go, oh, I'm number two, oh, capital C, and then they'll correct it. So the students are using very small language, but to help peer correct their classmates' sentences. On the right-hand side, you can see that we're using the electronic board. So I have, so I try to incorporate technology into my classroom as much as possible. And so I typed the sentences on a Google Doc, and you can see I have Zoom up. And so they're using the annotation tools because I do have a student that's on Zoom at the same time. We do HyFlex. So I have Zoom students and in-person students at the same time. So I need to use the Zoom annotation tools, not my projector annotation tools, so that the Zoom student can see the correction, the labeling. So we are labeling the sentences and the students are underlining the verb. putting a box around the prepositions and circling some vocabulary words. So again, I'm trying to make it very much more student directed. I mean, I could have done it easily myself and then students just check their paper, but having individual students come up on the board really helps them. And if you're thinking, oh, that takes a long time or whatever, that's okay. You know, you have time. So again, quality over quantity. I mean, yeah, quality over quantity. Digital skills. Because most of my students, as you can see, are in class. I don't have very many online students anymore, but we still want to practice some digital skills. And so our particular textbook that we use has QR codes. And so I was teaching the students how to use the QR codes to do the listening in the book. And you have to be very specific and mindful about when you do this, because otherwise it can be very chaotic. And so you show them how to do it. You give them about 5 minutes, and then you say, okay, you know, phones, you know, go ahead and silence your phones again. I have my students silence their phones because I don't like listening to notifications or, you know, having the phone ring. And so we designate certain times where they can use the phone, and then the other times they do not use their phone. And then also we have a Chromebook cart in our classroom. So again, I have to teach them very specifically how to even take out the Chromebook, you know, unplug the Chromebook, take the Chromebook out, look for your number, da, 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 da. And it's a very step-by-step process. And we do this for all levels, whether they're beginning ESL to HSC. When they're, you know, of course, in their higher level English, you can, you know, I have a slide presentation that I do all the steps with. You basically can talk to your students about how to do it if they have higher level English. But again, you really need to do those steps because you want to make sure that the Chromebooks are taken care of properly, or your laptops are taken care of properly. Student communication. Sometimes this is very difficult for new teachers to establish these expectations that the students will communicate with each other, because a lot of times they just want to sit and listen and do the work and then go home. But again, the two biggest needs for ESL students especially are speaking and listening. So you want to give them opportunities to practice speaking. Listening, they're doing all the time. They're listening to you talk, the whole class, or, you know, other students, or an audio. But the speaking part is the part that they don't really have a lot of opportunities, and especially outside of the classroom. A lot of them don't speak English outside of their classroom unless they're at a job where, you know, sometimes they have to. But so to give them these opportunities where they have familiar vocabulary, and that they're something that they've practiced over and over again with you or with small groups, now they can practice in pairs. And so to give them these opportunities to really demonstrate what they know, and then you walk around and listen to, you know, their conversation, you listen to their questions, their pronunciation, and then you're trying to help them out. Your biggest benefit, if you have ethnicities in your classroom, is to pair students up that don't speak the same language. Sometimes that doesn't happen very often. You might primarily have one group of students, and, you know, that happens. But if you do get an opportunity to mix and match your students from different languages, that really, really does help them a lot. So now we're talking about the summative assessment. This is your final exam or a project, and you're basically taking all of the lessons that you did within that unit, and the students are demonstrating their understanding of that content. And I know it's hard to believe, but you won't believe how much students love tests. Um, I usually give my tests on Thursdays, and it's usually the highest attending day that I have for whatever reason. So students really do like to take tests, most of them. And you can, you know, if it's a speaking test, you know, you might have the students doing some seat work, you know, like a worksheet or whatever, and then you call up a student one by one to your desk and you have a conversation with them, and you're checking their alphabet, you're checking their pronunciation, you're checking questions, you know, things like that. And then you just go through, you know, individually each one. If you have a lot of students, you know, you might not get through them all in one day. You know, you might have to split them up and do them, you know, other days. Um, and so then I do want to show you this. Okay, so because they're adults, they're perfectionists. They really, I mean, we understand that as adults as well. You know, we really want to be perfect in everything that we do. And so a lot of times this lends to the fact that I don't know this answer, so I'm going to either ask my friend or look on their paper or use my notebook, you know, things like that. If it's really, you know, if it's something that is important to you, that the test is authentic and that they're doing it on their own, you really need to set your expectations at the forefront. Um, really set your expectations about what you expect from them before you give them the assessment. Once they've started the test, it's really hard to, like, grab them again. Like, for you to see, say, um, um, no copying, or, don't look on her paper, it's already too late. You should have already established this before the test. If you have a choice, okay, so I was having a really big problem because it's beginning ESL. I was having a really big problem with students talking during the test. They talk with each other, they're asking each other questions. And I finally just, because they just didn't know the answers, if they were lower level or they were new. So what I started doing was I gave them a choice. I tell them at the before the test starts, I say, if you are no test, no problem, you can go home. Because I always do the test at the end of the class period, so that as they're finishing, they could just go. And so I have students who are not ready for the test. Either their English is too low, or they're a new student, they weren't ready for it. And I say, no problem, go ahead and go home. You can go home early. So I've eliminated the possibilities that the students who don't know will start talking or copying or doing other things. The students who are choosing to stay and take the test, they understand what the expectations are. They're not going to talk, they're not going to use their phone, they're not going to use any papers, they're not going to copy, and that's just the way it is. And when I first did it, the first time I decided to do this, I was blown away. I couldn't believe how well it worked, and I have been doing it ever since. So, I mean, it seems maybe a little harsh sometimes, but again, I'm giving them the choice of whether they take the test or not. Now, sometimes you don't have a choice. CASAS, you don't have a choice. All students must take a CASAS test. So, you have to use your strategies a little bit different. I'll tell you that in a minute too. But again, by giving them the choice of whether they're ready or not to take the test, fully eliminates any kind of cheating. So let me show you. Okay, so this is a picture of my slide up on the thing. And so it tells them very clearly, no talking, no copying, no papers, no phones. So they know that this is my expectation of them, that if they're going to take the test, they're going to do it on their own. I try to separate them as much as I can, but I have quite a few students right now. So, sometimes they're going to be sitting right next to each other. And I'm going to show you this video. It's a very short video of my students. This is the first test. This is the first time that they're taking a test in my class, and I'm going to show you what it looks like. I could not believe how silent it was in my classroom, and that everybody was working on their own and doing their own work, whether, whatever their skill level was. And I literally was so blown away. That's why I took that video, because I didn't expect it. I expected it, but I didn't expect it. I didn't know how it was going to go. And I was just floored that it was, that they worked so well. Oopsie, sorry. All right. Curriculum. Sometimes you don't have a choice of your curriculum, whether, your agency has its own adopted textbook and whatnot. And if you're a new teacher or you're teaching something new, my suggestion is that you don't over prepare your lessons, because I have been the victim of that, where I have gone through the lesson plan, I checked all these things, I made sure I understood everything, and then it was kind of waste. It was a waste of time, because once you get into the lesson itself, a lot of things change. Like your instincts will kick in, and maybe you're not going to do it in the same order that the teacher's edition said, or maybe again a teachable moment came and you want to do that instead. So I wouldn't over prepare. It's good to be prepared, to know what your lesson's going to be for that day, your agenda, but yeah, don't over prepare, and don't feel like you have to stick to it regimentally. If you do need any copies made or whatever, definitely have those done beforehand. If you get to them, great, you have them ready. And if you don't get to them because you were doing something else and it took longer than you expected, save them for the next day. It's not a problem. Again, you can repeat lessons and then go ahead and give them the worksheet the next time. you try to always have an agenda. I have an agenda every single day that the students copy. And, sometimes we stick to it and sometimes we don't. It just depends. And it's just kind of a guide for you and for the students to kind of let them know, like, hey, this is what I'm thinking we're doing today. Use the teacher's edition. For new teachers, the teacher's editions are great. They really just lay out everything for you. Or if you're substituting, use the teacher's edition. Those are great ways to just go ahead and not have to think on your feet or wing it. Within the lesson. And but as you get more experienced and you're doing, if you have the same curriculum every year after year after year, you're probably not going to use the TE as much. You're probably just going to be able to do things naturally and instinctually. And Another thing for adults is that, again, don't try to do something to wait, not, I don't want to say waste time, to fill in time. So I wouldn't get caught up in YouTube. YouTube is a great resource at times, but don't use it like as a babysitter, like an electronic babysitter for kids. Don't just put up YouTubes just to put up YouTubes to, fill in 10 minutes of the class time, because again, it doesn't do anything for the students. The students can watch a YouTube video at home. And so if you're going to show them a YouTube, make it interactive with them. Stop it, in between, ask some comprehension questions, get some feedback from them at the end, maybe do an activity about that YouTube. Make it so that it's not just something that they could have done at home, but you're doing it in class. And then take the time to figure out your pace. Again, embracing the silence. Those are things you might have said, like, oh, it's going to take me 5 minutes to do this. And then all of a sudden you ripped through it and it's 2 minutes. And now you don't know what to do with the other 3 minutes. Or maybe you said it was 5 minutes and now it's, 8 or 9 minutes. That's okay. Don't worry about it. Don't rush it just to rush it. Slow it down. It's better to do it slowly than quickly. Okay. And again, if you kind of think about your own situation, like if you were to go to Korea and you were going to take some Korean lessons, how would you want that teacher to teach you? Rush through a lesson and just keep doing worksheet after worksheet, or really taking the time to make sure that you understand the alphabet or the vocabulary words or things like that, repeating the next day what you learned yesterday, things like that. Those are the kinds of things that you want to give to your students as well. So you also want to make sure that you engage with multiple learning styles. Just like all of us, we know that we all learn differently. So some people are more tactile, some people are more visual, some people are more auditory. So you really want to embrace different activities that embrace all of that. And so this is, you're like, oh, they're adults, they don't want to cut, or they don't want to color, or they don't want to draw. They do. As they most certainly do at any level. I've done these kinds of activities and all ESL levels. I've done it with ABE, I've done it with HSD. Sometimes they just kind of need a break. Reading all the time or writing all the time, it gets old. And so sometimes they just need to kind of step away and do some more like hands-on things, like cutting some things and putting them in order, or, like I do alphabetical order. So the students are learning the vocabulary, but then they're also putting the words in alphabetical order, things like that. So you can actually take these lessons or these activities and really bring them more academic. It's not just like a cutting activity, which for adults, and if you know this, some of them don't know how to cut. They don't know how to use scissors. If you ever have students who are not literate in their own language, they've never gone to school in their own country, or they've never practiced it, they don't know how to use scissors. They don't know how to use a pencil sharpener, an electric pencil sharpener. So again, we can't take it for granted that all students know all these things. Sometimes you have to step back and teach them how to use that electric pencil sharpener, or show them how to carry scissors, hold scissors, while they're walking from one place to another, things like that. So it's even beyond language. You have to kind of show them how to be students as well. We also, in order to really bring a sense of community, not only into your classroom, but for your school, is to really bring in students from other departments. So we have an adults with disabilities program at our school, and they, at break time, they sell like drinks and snacks. And so, but a lot of times the students just kind of go, they don't they don't really realize what this program is. So I always ask the AWD teacher to bring some of her students into my classroom and introduce them, so that my students can really see that we have this program that helps adult students that have these learning or physical disabilities, and that there's a program and we support them. And the students are blown away by that for two things that happen. One, they're so generous. They're so generous. They'll go and buy water or sodas, or what, I mean, not sodas, but drinks and things. But then also they learn about this program. And I had a student in my class who had a sibling who was an adult with disabilities, and they actually enrolled them into our class. They didn't know that we had this program until I told them about it, and they found a resource for their sibling to come and be a student at our school. So again, you never know what the situations are with your students. And so just by doing this little tiny activity for about 15 minutes, I just had them come and they had the opportunity to buy some things and support the program and then learn about them as well. Oh man, here we go. So I was telling you about how adult ed has tons of acronyms and key terms, and these are just some of them. I'm sure that some of you may have even heard or know some other ones that I haven't even put in here. I can't really go into all of them. So a lot of times, like, it's not even knowing what CDE stands for. It's like, what does it mean? So like, I can tell you CDE stands for the California Department of Education, right? But so they're the legislation process of adult for all schools. And then we have an adult ed division, and Dr. Carolyn Zachary is our state director. So she's the person, the grand poobah. She's the one that helps all of us in our adult education. OTAN, again, do you need to know what the acronym means? No, not necessarily. You just need to know that OTAN is supports adult educators into integrating more technology into the classroom. CASAS, again, that's your assessments. CalPro, this is for your professional development. EL Civics, if you teach ESL, most likely you'll know what EL Civics is. It's their authentic tasks that are performed by students in order to help them engage in more civic opportunities to prepare them for outside of your classroom. CATESL is CATESL is an ESL organization, kindergarten all the way through college, universities, and then independent studies. So it's an organization. It's a paid membership organization to help with ESL teachers. CCAE is adult educators. So it's a paid membership organization that helps adult education. ESL, ELL, English as a second language, English language learners. So most of the time in adult facilities, we say ESL, and K through 12 call it ELL for the same thing. ABE, that's your adult basic education. Those are the students that need more practice with specific skills. Maybe it's reading comprehension or math or writing. And then they're going to hopefully prepare to take either the high school diploma or the GED. So that's what the other ones are. WIOA is a grant that we apply for that's funding for our programs. LMS, Learning Management System, that's your Canvas, your Google Classroom, your Moodle, your Schoology, the ones that are listed below. SLOs are your student learning outcomes. Those are your goals and objectives as a school, as an agency for your students. These are the things that we want to give to our students. WASC is accreditation. Many agencies go through WASC to make sure that their program is accredited. Retention means how do you keep your students keep coming them back. So persistence also. So retention, keeping them. Persistence is having them keep coming back to your class every day. HyFlex is what we do at my school, is where I have in-class students and online students at the same time. I'm teaching them at the same time. Hybrid is more for one day in the classroom, one day online. Things like that. But agencies do define those differently. So it just depends on how your agency defines what their model of instruction is. Oh man, does anybody, I know there's some things in the chat. Let me just double check. Okay, so if you have any questions, please feel free. You can unmute if you want, if you feel more comfortable just saying the question, or you can type it in the chat. Mandalee has put in the evaluation link in the chat. Please, I would encourage you to please fill out all of the evaluations for all the sessions. They really do help the presenters, acknowledging, you know, like what worked well, what didn't work well, what can we change, because we always want to make our presentations the best that they can be for all, you know, conferences and things. Please, 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 as a new teacher, or, you know, an experienced teacher, just take some deep breaths. Don't worry, everything works out. Your students will love you. You know, they're just so wonderful. They're so motivated to come. And as long as you're meeting their needs, they're going to keep coming back into your classroom. I appreciate your time so much. We have about 3 minutes. Oh, thank you so much, Eric. I really appreciate that. I try to definitely. I appreciate any feedback. So honestly, if there were some things, if I, you know, if it was too fast for you, or I didn't include things, or this was too much, please put those in the evaluations, because it can only help me as a presenter as well. I really appreciate your time. I love that you guys are coming in here to the conference and trying to get as much professional development as you can. And with that, I'm just going to let it go. If there are any questions, please unmute or type them in the chat.
Thank you, Elisa.
Of course.
For the wonderful presentation and all the tips. Yeah. And thank you everyone for participating. This is the last day of our CAPE Summit. And please take a moment to provide feedback. Like Elisa said, it really means a lot. Your feedback, we would really appreciate it. If anyone has any questions, yeah, no? All right.
I think we're good.
All right, then everything
You're
understood.
welcome. Embrace the silence.
Exactly. All right, everyone have a good day.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.